My name is Mike Reese, and I'm a certified handgun instructor and have been working at a firearm dealership for 3 years now. And I'm going to show you an instructional video of how to disassemble and reassemble two firearms. First one's going to be the M1 Garand rifle that you'd be carrying in World War II, and the next one's the 1911 semi-automatic pistol that you would also carry as your sidearm in World War II. And during this video, I'll be instructing another gentleman on how to do this who has never done it before. This is Alex Moreland, student of Westmont High School, learning how to do the same steps that I'll be showing you today.
So Mike, what's the first step when you're disassembling the M1 Garand?
Well, the first step you always want to do before disassembling any firearm at all is always to check to see if the weapon is loaded. And when the weapon is unloaded, it'll lock in the rear position. When the magazine is empty, there's this piece called the follower stands in front of the action and stops it from coming forward. But you always want to make sure the chamber is not loaded as well, so you want to use a finger or something that you can push into there to make sure it's empty. You may be used to the color of seeing brass, but some rounds can have a black casing, which is this part of the bullet right here, and you may not see it when you draw back the action and the weapon can still fire. And then to close the weapon, you push the follower out of the way, pull the bolt back and slowly let it forward, make sure your fingers are clear, and that's it.
Alright, now that we got the safety done with what's part two?
The second part is after you check the safety, make sure the gun was unloaded, you want to make sure that the firearm was cocked, so you do that same position, and then you remove something known as the trigger grouping, which is this whole section of the rifle. Right, and to remove the trigger grouping, you should use a tool like a screwdriver or just any round small piece of metal, and you insert it through this loop right here. You apply upward pressure and it pops loose. You want to make sure this is all the way forward, and you move it back and forth until it removes out of the firearm. That is the trigger grouping. Step 3 is to remove the stock off the firearm, and that's going to be this lower portion of wood right here. This part's going to stay on here with the metal parts. In order to do this, set the rifle upside down. And with older rifles, a lot of times the wood is swollen and it's pressing against the metal and it's hard to remove, and there are tools to do that. But if you were a soldier in World War I and did not have much to use besides your hands, you have to apply some force. So one way to do this is set the barrel flat on the table, lift the sights slightly off the firearm, and put a piece of padding here so you don't damage your sights at all. But you want to apply downward pressure here and upward pressure here. So you just have to very lightly hit it. You don't want to apply too much pressure and hurt the gun though. And that's how you remove the stock out of the firearm.
So now that we have the stock removed, what comes off next?
The next part to disassemble on the rifle is the magazine, and this is the part that holds your ammunition, so when you fire it gets fed upright into the action, and this part is probably going to be one of the more difficult parts of this. You got to pay very close attention to the steps you did and why you're doing this, because it gets very confusing during reassembly. Okay, so the first step you're going to do here to disassemble the magazine is you're going to pull this bar back, and it's attached to a part that's on the bottom of the actual magazine follower. So you pull this back. It takes a lot of force. These things are under high tension, and this comes out to the side. The next step you're going to do is there's a pin right here that needs to be removed, and as a soldier, some of the few tools you had were like your bullet. You can use a bullet to drift this pin out and remove it. The next part is the front of the magazine. That is just a simple piece of sheet metal. It pulls right out of the firearm, and you have two parts to this. The next step in here, there's only two more parts left, and then the actual magazine follower itself. And that's all the parts of the magazine. So the next step is to remove the gas operating system, and that's the functional part of the rifle that makes the bolt retract and go into its forward position to fire. So the first step you do is remove your spring. And if this doesn't want to come out easily, don't force it. You can damage part of the rifle and it won't function properly. If it does not come out easily, you want to spray something down there like some type of oil to loosen up all the debris so it'll pull right out. Then the next step is to bring this thing to the back of the firearm, of the action, and you'll see that, it might be hard to see in the video, but there is a notch right here in the gun that stands out. And if you have the firearm in front of you, it's very easy to see. You want to move the back of the lever cover up the notch. You push up and out, and this comes loose. This part just comes out of the rifle, and that is known as the gas operating lever. This part is the whole functional piece of the rifle, and it's something that's unique to this gun. Not many guns have a similar part. And this is the final step in disassembling the rifle, and this is the part that strikes the round to make it fire and also feeds the rounds into the chamber. This is called the bolt, and this part right now is loosely fit into the rifle. It just moves around, and what you have to do is you have to move it forward right before this notch of metal, lift it up, turn it sideways and out. And that is the full disassembly of an M1 Garand rifle. There's no need to go further than this. There are other parts that can be removed, but they require more complex tools to use.
Well, that actually wasn't that hard, so I hope the reassembly isn't any harder.
It's not really that bad. It's pretty much the exact same steps you just saw, but all in reverse. This is probably the hardest part, putting the bolt back in, but you kind of just watch the part of the video before, and it rotates from the top in, falls into place. The next part we're going to move on to is the gas system. This lever falls right into the rifle, lines up with the bolt and that notch at the same time once again. You kind of apply a little bit of pressure and move it back and forth until you find where it catches with the bolt. And that's going to be a certain point in the gun where you can't really see it too well, but you feel it when it happens. And that part snaps in place. And then you have the rifle back in the forward position, makes it a little easier to operate with, and the magazine goes back together. First piece always is the follower. You got to make sure you got it the right side down. There'll be a little moving part that moves side to side. That needs to face downward into the action there. That will fall into place. And the next pieces, they're all going to have a hole that need to line up for when you put the pin back in. So the first piece is this half kind of rectangle piece of metal. And you'll notice some notches in the gun where it'll just line up and click into place where it doesn't move anymore. The next part to put in is this little piece. There's a gap cut out in the bottom. This moves into this part right here. You want to start it in the upward position, and you'll feel it hook into a little spring-loaded piece of metal. So you see that little piece of metal inside there? That is the part that you use to eject the magazine out of the gun if you decide to, just to make it easier to unload. Next piece is this little kind of kinked piece of metal. It goes in sideways, you rotate it upright, and it will actually land into some tracks on the follower, so it'll lift up and right and move back and forward just a little bit. And that piece just falls right in, and if they're all put in properly, the pin will just insert in into its locking position. The next step is to put this big spring back in, and some people have issues with this. They have to kind of fight it because it is a lot of pressure to put it back in. So this moves into the tube. You want to retract it into this magazine. This part clips and falls in, and you'll see it bends this direction. If you put it in upside down, it'll fit on there, but it won't function in the rifle. And to make sure you put the magazine in correctly, you should be able to grab the follower and lift it, and you'll feel some spring tension in there of it moving up and down. The next step is to put the stock into place. There's a little tiny half circle here. It lines up with the gas tube. That part sandwiches down, and it'll be pretty tight in there if you did it right. The next step is the trigger grouping. You need to put this in the upright position. Kind of line it out. The wood's cut out to fit perfectly like a puzzle piece. It just goes down, apply pressure downward, it'll snap into place. And that is the full reassembly of the M1 Garand rifle. You definitely want to make sure the last part that everything functions smoothly. If you did something wrong, the gun won't work at all just by operating by hand. So you want to make sure the magazine will go up, catch the bolt, and to close it, and make sure that functions too. And just like I said, always make sure your gun's unloaded. You always want to know that before anytime you pull the trigger. That part of the weapon functions too. That's all you need to do to reassemble the M1 Garand rifle. Alright, so now that you think the rifle is pretty easy to disassemble, and it seems like you seem pretty confident that you can reassemble it, think you can do it yourself?
I think I'll give it a try. Good. Sign you up for arm.
touch it. Roll this. One, wait, what's the same? I'm reselling gun. You can watch the shot.